Good morning and welcome to the organizational assessment presentation for Valley Community Services.
Okay, this is John Nick. With me are Deb Thompson and Mark Novad. We had a great start to this morning. My son Scott's with us, and we pulled in to get gas, and when we went to leave, his car wouldn't start. So I left him there stranded. I don't care. It's his problem. It's his car. It's his problem. So I'm here, and hopefully he'll join us. As you guys know, we promised when we came in and spent time with you, and I know everybody in this room spent time with either Deb or Mark or Scott or myself, and gathered data from you, and we told you when we did that we'll come back and share our results with you. We had a meeting last night with GN, shared the results with him, had a meeting with the board, shared the results with the board, and now today with you guys. So the same process would work if you have a question, don't hold it. Interrupt me, let's make it a session. And so if you have a question or concern or you don't understand something that we talk about, just bring it up right then. Fair enough? You all ready? Who wants to do the opening prayer? I think Scott needs to. Okay, so here we go. The background, and some of this, just bear with me. It's all stuff you know, but I think it's important to get us in the right track for the report. VCS has experienced significant growth over the direction of the new CEO. The organization believes there's an opportunity to continue to grow the business. Excuse me. The CEO wants to grow the organization by empowering and engaging employees at all levels. Now, that's key, and I think that's one of the reasons that he asked us to come down and do this assessment, is because he wants to know, how do we do that? Then the process, you guys know, we interviewed 6 of the board members and 50 of you guys. And then here are some consensus items. 100% of all those interviewed are very mission-focused. Now, this is important. So 50 people, all of you have that mission focus. We don't often see this. This is a rarity for us. We normally see some disjointment here or people not on the same. You guys are on the same page. You know the mission. You know why you're here. So that jumps out at us very quickly. Don't get the table. Thank you, Dan. I'll put my hands on my knees. The recent growth can be directly attributed to the strategy, direction, and involvement of the new CEO. All participants understand that the vision and direction of the organization is to sustain continued growth. So as we get into this, you're going to hear Deb and Mark tell you a little bit more. But I think the communication part of the fact that we want to grow has been given out. The town hall meetings, perhaps even some emails. But everybody seems to know that's the tone that's being set, is growth. Now if we look at findings, the support functions are operating in a reactive mode and they're not appropriately supporting operations. Now that jumps up pretty quickly, and I want to talk about it. For those of you in the support functions, we see this a lot in organizations that grow, because what happens is we have in the organization what we call the nucleus. In some companies they call it, quote, the corporate office, right? The corporate office is this group that supports everything. And then as we grow and expand and as we add different offices or different locations, that same group that was centered around the offices that worked around it now has to support people in outside locations, people in different locations. And right now it was pretty apparent to us that that's not happening the way we think it should. So we're going to come back to that. Consultants identified a lack of collaboration between the support functions and the operating unit, and also to some degree lack of collaboration within the operating unit. So what happens here is, I think we're going to talk about this a lot as we go through this, but what happens is departments, units, or areas sometimes tend to build what we call silos. We think everything revolves around what happens within the geography of where we are. And especially for support functions, the mission and vision of support functions is to do what the operations people need to get their jobs done better, not to control it. So we're going to talk a lot about that, because we believe support functions need to understand customer service from both an external facet and also internal. Because from a support function standpoint, we have internal customers, and our job is to support them.
The other thing that's important to say at this point is that as we talk about the fact that the support functions need changed and it needs to be redefined and collaboration needs to be improved, this is not a criticism of anyone as individuals or any of your departments. It's more of a reflection of your organization has grown significantly and stretched your infrastructure to try to do that, which, by the way, is remarkable for all of you who are breaking your necks to do that. But it's not sufficient in order to help the organization grow to the next level. So that's why we're honing in on these things. And again, it's not a criticism. It's more a reflection of this is the growing pains you're feeling and why.
The organizational structure is not designed for sustained growth. I could go on for hours about this, but typically what we find with an organization is at some point somebody does an org chart. And then they do what I call the Band-Aid effect. Someone dies, quits, retires, or we hire somebody new, we put a Band-Aid on that particular portion. What they don't do is go back and restructure their organization to accommodate where they are now or where they want to go. Because remember, your structure was put together, 20, 25, 30 years ago. So what you have to do is refocus on that structure to get it so that it's focused on where we're going to go, not where we've been. There's siloing effect in most departments or units. I've talked about that. Most participants understand the desire for growth, but most do not understand the change necessary to it. So it's one thing for me. We do a lot of executive coaching, and we do a lot of work with trying to get people to modify their behaviors. And it's one thing for me to say to somebody, "You missed too much work. You got to get to work on time." Well, having said that, I feel good. I told them what they needed to do. The question is, how do you do it? So behavior modification needs some reinforcement, needs some thought, and people talking about the way we used to do things is not the way we want to do them in the future. So when we talk about this, changes are necessary in behaviors, processes, and practices. So we behave the way we behave today because that's the way we behaved yesterday and the days before, and it was acceptable. Our processes, the question is, somehow we get the ball over the goal line, but we're not really even sure how. And then practices are really detrimental things. Practices are this statement that says, but that's the way we do it here, or we've always done it. And those things will pull you back. They'll drag you down. It doesn't allow you the optimism and the thought process to do something different and change and move in the right direction or in a different direction. Employees clearly have the passion and commitment to the mission of caring for those they serve. Now, again, these three guys who interviewed all of you guys told me this just kept coming up. People are here for a reason. I mean, you people had choices when you decided to go to work for somebody. So this is something that's inbred. It's why you're here. The challenge for us or for you is to create the same passion and focus regarding the organizational changes necessary for future sustained growth. And you guys know you're in a very competitive market. And what you want to do is win. And I don't mean that we're in the battle of win-lose, but you do want to be best of the best. And to be best of the best, you can't stay where you were because your competitors are not staying. So you really have to modify your thinking about where we're going and how do we do that. Overview. Behaviors, processes, and practices need to be modified to support the changes that are necessary in leading employees through sustained growth. And by the way, here's what you guys got going for you. I can only tell you that from the time I met GN, I was impressed. Now, I was impressed because we believe in employee engagement and employee empowerment. We believe that. That's our life. That's what we do. And he talks about employee engagement and empowerment. It just rolls off his tongue. This isn't prepared. It's the way he feels. So what we know from what we've done over 30 years, from what we've been doing for our whole professional life, that those organizations that engage and involve their employees at all levels and make them feel empowered, they're going to be the winners. They're going to be the winners. And witness, if you will, just what's happened here. GN could have gone back to his office, closed the door, and come out and said, we're making changes, guys. Here they are. Here's what we're going to do. I think we need to do this, this, and this to get better. But instead, he said, well, I want to know what they think. I want them to have some input to this. I'm not going to push. I'm going to help pull with them. So he asked us to interview you guys to get your input so that we could do this to tell you, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, what do we do well, what don't we do well. So you're going to be part of this from the day it starts till the day it ends. And I guarantee you, it's not over. You guys know. When we get done with this, there's nothing will change. When we walk out of here today, nothing will change. It will be just the way it was yesterday or before Christmas. Because all we're doing is giving you information. But what our information is giving you is what you need to do to change. So the next step will be the big one, if and when you take it. These changes to be effective must be evolutionary, not Now, this is critical. And I'm going to give you an example. Way back when, remember when we went into the smoking cessation thing? And we had clients that, they just loved it because the CEO didn't smoke anymore and everybody stopped smoking. So he put a sign up, this is now a non-smoking facility. And they wreaked havoc. Then the smart ones said, in 6 months, this will be a non-smoking facility. Here's what will happen. We'll slowly not smoke in the conference rooms. You're going to be able to smoke in your office. And then after a while, you won't be able to smoke it. But in 6 months, no smoking in the building. And it was smooth. So what we know is you can't go in and just say, boom, it's changed. You have to communicate it. You have to talk about it. You have to communicate to employees. It will be a better life. And you guys have to be part of that. You have to embrace it, and you have to be part of that communication process that takes us from where we are to where we want to be. And once we get that machine moving, it's dynamic. So we also know that the employees must be given the opportunity. Okay, now let me talk about this one, please. The way we behave today is the way we behaved yesterday unless something influences us. Unless something says, but you need to change. You need to do it differently. I mean, you get this at home. You get it with your spouses, significant others, with your kids. You see it every day. And we believe every person that gets up to go to work in the morning has the right to pick the attitude they want to take to work. Think about it. Every morning when you get in that car, you have the right to pick the attitude you want to take to work. If you're mad at your spouse, take that attitude into work. If you believe today is going to be a good day and that we're going to make people happy, you take that attitude into work. So what happens now is over the course of time, however long you shared with us the last meeting, some of you guys have been in your job, 20-some years, right? Almost 30 years. So those things, the way you behaved and the way you did your job, obviously was rewarded because you still have your job, you got pay increases, so what I'm doing is fine. So just keep doing this until somebody says, no, we need more. Or we've got to change. We've got to do it differently. So now when we find out we have to do it differently, it takes behavior modification. Because how many of you in this room smoked? How many were smokers at one time? How many of you quit? Right? It's that sort of, maybe, possibly. But I went through this 3 times. I quit smoking 3 different times, and then I started. And finally, when I got myself resigned to stop smoking, I stopped smoking. And I knew it was the right thing to do, but it wasn't the behavior I exhibited before. So it was so easy to continue doing this. And so what happens is you have to have help and support and go slow. So we know as we create a new environment, we've got to teach people, train people, coach people, and work with people in that new environment and what's necessary now. Specific programs designed for enterprise transformation must be orchestrated throughout the process. So here's the deal, guys. You're going to see in this report we say something like everybody knows what the problem is, but nobody seems to know how to fix it. You're not experts in fixing. You're experts in doing what you're paid to do every day. We're experts in fixing. This is what we get paid to do. We do this every day. We work with a number of companies, organizations, just like yours, where we know the steps. So it's like I have to have help, and the help has to know what they're doing. So as much as you might want to change, as much as you talk about growth, how do I get there? What are the steps? What do I need to do? That's where it needs to be designed and orchestrated with some support from the outside. So the recommendation, this is the executive overview. Embark on an enterprise transformation process designed to address all deficiencies noted in the full report. Now the full report. Okay. I'm not going to dwell on the background because I think you guys all know this. I mean, there's nothing that's new news here. It talks about how big you are and the size of millions of dollars and that you're going through change and that we've been asked to help you. So that's what the background says. This purpose, I think, is important because before we start any project, we want to make sure that our clients agree with the purpose. And so we identified the purposes to identify impediments: behavioral, process, and practices. Now remember, three things. Behaviors are us. That's the way we behave. And sometimes it's an impediment to growth. Sometimes it's an impediment to even getting through the day with coding. Processes are, yeah, we get the ball across the goal line, but we're not really sure how that happens. I mean, just seems to get done. So when we look at processes, sometimes we try to define who's responsible, and sometimes we find that 5 people think they're responsible. Sometimes it's like we don't know. It just happens. And so we have to look at the processes. Then the practices are what I talked about before, and this is where we get stuck in that rut of saying we've always done it. We've always done it. Or we tried that, it didn't work. So those are the practices that we say you got to set aside and start thinking about where we're going, not where we've been. The assessment process is designed to elicit maximum engagement and support by soliciting the input of a large cross-section. That's why you guys are here, because rather than GM saying, I know what's wrong, here it is, help me fix it. He said, you talk to our people and find out how they feel about this and give me some input so I can collectively decide where we're going. Further, the purpose of the project is to deliver recommendation and implementation options that will have a positive effect on the organizational change, enabling growth through employee engagement. Now, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this is what we were told. If it's wrong, somebody has to tell us. We were told we want to grow. We don't want to be small. We want to be larger. Now, there's good news with that growth, because if you grow well, there's a lot of job security, right? And there isn't anybody in this room that probably wouldn't think, in the best case scenario, I'd like to retire from here, have a nice retirement plan, and work my job until I retire. So the growth has been given to us as one of the objectives and seen as a positive thing. We're not going to just get better at what we're doing now. We're going to do more and we're going to do better. And the second is that we want to do this through employee engagement and empowering our employees. Now, a lot of people want to grow, but they don't even think about what that means to the employees. So the difference here from our standpoint, we're going into this with 2 distinct thoughts: growth and growth through employees. And that's really paramount. The objective: to assess, identify practices, shared goals, align, define roles, performance standards, systems or processes, procedures, working relationship, behaviors, or other barriers. Because here's what happens, guys. You know them. You've shared them with us. You know the barriers that are keeping you from being as good as you could. Sometimes it's personality. It's that person I don't like or I don't like working with. Sometimes it's we always done it that way. Always done it that way. And sometimes it's just, well, it's just easier to keep doing what I'm doing rather than have a new computer system or looking at things differently than I did before. So these are the things that, from the standpoint of the objective, we got to extract that data. The assessment also identifies factors across functional area units or locations that may be barriers to organizational-wide collaboration, supportiveness, and team behavior. Now, I'm going to ask you guys, do you believe to be successful that you need to have organizational-wide collaboration? Do you believe you can exist in your own department without having collaboration with other departments? I mean, think about it. It can't happen. We're on the same team. Have you ever heard the saying that the guy says, we've identified the enemy and he is us? Well, that's what happens when you don't have collaboration and support. Everything we do should be focused to help wherever we have to help to get that bottom line affected positively, which is our job security. The assessment also identifies how we did that. The evaluation identifies real and perceived factors of organizational dysfunction. Now, ask you one more question. the experts tell us that in the absence of fact, perception becomes our reality. So we've done this long enough to know that some people have perceptions about things that are absolutely wrong. They have perceptions about coworkers that are absolutely wrong, but they don't have any facts or information to tell them different. So in the absence of fact or information, I will hold on to my perception. My perception, they're a good person, they're a bad person. A naughty and nice person. You guys know how that works. So what happens is now we got to talk as the professional adults in a working environment about how our behavior affects the behaviors of others, and how we got to get out of that just believing something because we've always believed it, as opposed to what's right and what's wrong. And this is very difficult because perceptions have a place in our life. So some of these dysfunctional things that we've identified are lack of shared goals, role definition, assign the line. Where do you cross the line? I'll give you an example. You guys are no different. Every organization we go to, there's a question of where does payroll belong? Do they belong in HR or do they belong in accounting? You know, there's no right answer, by the way. But if you think of that across IT, where does it belong? It affects every department. HR affects every department. So you got to think about what are the goals and how are we aligned and how do we define what our role is to support the other people. Role definition, process issues, relationship issues, behavioral impediments, and this old dog that keeps raising its ugly head, ongoing practices. But that's the way this always works. So the process, the assessment included internal assessment through in-depth interviews with board members, senior management team, floor support people, program managers, and others. You guys know the list. So first what we did, after we did this, after we collected the interviews and did the intakes with you guys, then the four of us, Scott, Deb, Mark, and myself, sat down and we compared notes. Now, the beauty of doing intakes with four people is you don't just get one person's thought. So now when we sat down, am I being that? Am I too far?
You jumped ahead. You're talking about the next slide.
Well, am I okay or am I not?
You're fine. You're good. I'm just trying to catch up to where you are. You just haven't turned the page yet.
Oh, okay. So what we did, that's the list of people we interviewed. So
right.
you guys know who all we interviewed. There it is. So then after the interviews or the intakes were done, the four of us sat down, and what we did is we sort of compared notes and looked for common thread. What are the things that everybody said, like everybody caring about the mission and caring about what we're here for? And what do we hear that's a weakness? So we went through that, and then we started compartmentalizing our data and then doing a report. So after a number of days together and slowly editing this thing and putting it together, then we shared it with Jan first yesterday and then the board last night and now today. So those are the steps. Am I okay? Mm-hmm. All right, good. I thought I was okay then. So now I'm over on page 6. Any questions so far while I'm flipping pages? Anybody would care to just get up and leave? Say, I'm done with this? Please don't. Yes, ma'am.
You just have a copy of this. I mean, it's a lot of information to try to, digest as you're going through it.
The answer is yes. Now, here, let me say this. Remember we talked about the interviews not being confidential but being proprietary?
Right.
In other words, if you told us something that was illegal or wrong, we have an obligation to share it. Otherwise, if it's proprietary, that means you and I are going to talk about it and it's not going to. So with this information, I've always been a little nervous about it getting in the hands of people who want to dissect it and say this is wrong. Well, this applies to them, not me. So what I would like, if you guys want a copy to have it, but can you treat it as proprietary information and not distribute it? You don't want it on the board. That's my view. Yeah, but you guys are pretty good at facts and stuff. I heard that. So I don't want you faxing it either. Okay. So I'm on page 7 now, correct?
Yep.
I'm going to let you guys pick up because these are the staff interviews. So why don't you guys do this because you're the ones that did these. not me. Deb, you want to start?
Sure. A couple of, so you all remember, as we did the interview, staff members were asked to describe their roles, strengths, and weaknesses in the organization, and to share ideas to change the organizational structure. In the context of that, we did hear a variety of stories and things that, sort of informed our thinking about some of the conclusions. So some of the conclusions that we've come to aren't necessarily what we heard word for word, but what we believe it means in terms of the organization. Now, every single person that we talked to, as John has said numerous times, you're all well-intended, very mission-focused, and express genuine concern for the organization. And a lot of people talked about their commitment to the organization as well as to the people you serve as the reasons why folks continue to work here. Some participants, and I would say not everyone had complete role clarity about what their role is and what it means. And we actually talk about a lack of role clarity because a number of people talked to us about the fact that they didn't know where the decision-making authority began and ended related to their job. That was the biggest, it wasn't that folks didn't understand their job description. Everyone really understood what they should be doing, but they really there was a lack of clarity about what the decision-making authority was, being unclear. And we heard a lot from what I call the newbies, that people had to learn their jobs over the last 5 years or so through trial and error, and describe different ways of sort of learning from other people. But while there's an orientation program, we're not talking about orientation being a problem, but this understanding of what the requirements are for the job is more what's missing out of that. Those systems are lacking. And again, we also heard over and over again, and I was really astounded at the clarity of vision and direction that Scott and I did the majority of the interviews with the program supervisors in the houses. The clarity of the vision for the organization expressed at that level is astoundingly positive. That those folks, and in many organizations that we work with, you get to a frontline supervisor level, and people are like, yeah, we do the mission, but I don't know what the organization is trying to accomplish and what it's all about. Almost every single person that we talked to at that level could actually articulate not just the goals to focus on mission, but the goals of the organization to grow and how. And a lot of people cited GM's vision for leading the leader. And that was what we thought that was very positive. A lot of people talked, almost everybody cited the growth and the positive changes in the organization over the last few years. We got we've made a lot of change in the last few years. We've grown, communication has improved, we're trying to get things done, and we're stretched very thin and it's killing us, okay? And different stories about really what that means. Again, those weren't people's words, but that's kind of the synthesis of what we heard. And a lot of people talked about GM, what I'll call an open door policy. And while most indicated that they had good relationships with the people in the middle between them and GM, a lot of times there were, I'll call it information back and forth gaps, that sometimes it was easier just to go to GM to get a decision made or to get help with solving a problem, because can't hear back from the people in the middle in a reasonable time frame. So we did hear a variety of comments about that. Again, expressed with, some people have just way too much to do and too large a scope of responsibility to effectively be able to get back to us in a good period of time, within a couple of days or within a day or so if something is urgent. Sometimes it takes weeks to hear things back.
Mark, do you want to weigh in on this?
Well, here's what I would say. Some of us, not all, like to focus on the negative. Right? One of the things that you guys, the team, has to be and understand. We've been doing this a long time. John said this right off the bat. I have never seen an organization that is this mission focused of any company I've ever worked with.
I would agree with that.
Unbelievable, and do not lose sight of it. That's
who you are.
That's who you are, and that's a reflection of you and what you do. So, again, we're going through things. We're going to share a lot of stuff. Some of it may be, I would bet a lot of money that most of you know everything that's on these pages. Got this from you, right? But do not lose sight of one very critical thing. You guys and your sense of mission is uncanny. That is a strength of this organization that you cannot downplay.
And again, I will tell you, just to reinforce, we do not see this in all cases. You guys are you're the exception to the rule. You really are. So now, you okay, Nick? I'm good. Okay, you okay? Mm-hmm. So if we look at the strengths, strong commitment to caring for the individuals we serve, strong sense of loyalty to the mission, and desire for the organization to succeed. Now, to a person, I didn't do the interviews, but I guarantee every one of you would say, in my best scenario, I want to grow in my job, I want to serve the company, and I want to stay here until I can have a nice retirement. This is good news. So when we talk about the organization to succeed, here's where we get some of the conflict will come in. Because sometimes people think for us to succeed is doing the same thing over and over. And so slowly you're getting a message that we need to grow and do things differently. So now you have to define success differently. That may have worked for you in the past. It may not work in the future. So we have to really define what that success is going to be as we move forward. Strong sense of commitment to family, agency, stability. You're going to see things in here that I was told where people said, you just won't believe how I'm treated. I had a personal problem with the family, and I was given time. The concern was much more over me and my family than was the job. You can't buy that stuff. You can't buy that stuff, guys. And you shared that with these people. And I'm telling you, we've got clients that we call it the ride them hard and put them away wet motif. It doesn't matter. That's your problem. You're no good to me if you're not here. I don't think you guys ever hear that. And that's marvelous. That's another reason why we can go back and talk about the employee empowerment engagement. Organization is flexible with employee needs and scheduling. Again, it's not about us. It's about making sure you get your job done with understanding what you've got going on in your life. And again, I'm going to tell you, you can't buy that. That is worth tons. Town hall meetings and information sharing through forums. Understanding the CEO's vision for the future of the agency. And this note, clear in locations outside of Mount Pleasant. And I want these guys to talk about that. One of you jump in.
Well, I think what we could say about that is, usually in remote locations, in many organizations, the information about what's going on is usually less. There's sort of a negative trickle-down effect. People outside of the main office know less about what's going on than people in the office. What we found fascinating is that when we talked to the people who worked in the corporate office, they had less clarity and understanding about what the details were of what the vision for growth was than people who worked out in what I'll call especially the hinterland of Carlisle, okay, which might as well be on the moon, okay? So folks out in those areas, Springdale and Bedford and Carlisle, those people did have a good sense of what the vision for the future of growth was, and more details, comparatively speaking, about how that was to be accomplished than the folks necessarily working right here in the mountain.
So then if we go to page 8, which I guess you're there, some more of the strengths. CEO is perceived as an ally for the organizational change and is trying hard to grow the organization. Ideas are fostered and encouraged. Changes within the organization, for the most part, were viewed positively. Most of the participants want to enhance technology to grow the company. These guys told me that the IT thing kept coming up. We'll talk more about that later. Staff knowledge, experience, and longevity. Now, here's one more thing that I want to share with you that we've learned over the years. The organizations that grow from good to great are organizations that have the ability to blend the old with the new. So you need some of the people that've been here a long time that know the way we do things and know how to get things done. But you've got to blend that with people coming in who came from other places that did it differently and have different ideas. And so when we do team building, we talk about these 3 blocks. Over here, we've got the people who say, if it's not broke, don't touch it. Over here, we got the people who say, if it's not broke, break it. And then in the middle, we have a team that says, if it's not broke, let's examine it. Let's see if we really are doing it right or if there's not a better way. But when you bring old with new, it gives you the ability to start looking at things and thinking about doing them better ways and not just being locked into, well, we never did it that way, so we shouldn't do it that way. And so what happens with the beauty of growth is it allows you the opportunity to bring these people in and to have us blend the old with them, because that's when organizations are. Ideas are fostered and encourage changes within the organization for the most part are viewed positively. Most of the participants want to enhance technology to help grow the company. And notice we said most. So some of you are very much like me. We're technological neophytes. I thought that.
Or dinosaurs.
It doesn't matter. So I went there kicking and screaming. We have a hurry? Yeah, okay. I'm time check. I'll hurry. Staff knowledge, experience, and longevity. Most participants are trying to work together and make things better. Again, understand, you'll see that we say most, because sometimes we get people who are not quite there yet. Communication has improved. Training has improved. However, more technical training and management development training are necessary. Weaknesses reported. Some people told us that they didn't really want to tell us how they felt for fear of repercussions. That's, by the way, not abnormal.
And let me jump in and put a qualifier on
that. You can't. We don't have enough time.
I know, but it's important to explain that, because when you hear the word repercussions, a lot of people automatically assume that what you're talking about is getting fired. Okay? That's actually not the case here. That wasn't what was expressed, repercussions. There was more fear of repercussions of other people hearing that someone might have criticized them as a person, and that would impact their how the people relate to them, and how people get back to them, and somebody heard me criticize so and so. Well, they're not going to get back to me in a timely manner and do what I need to help me moving forward. That's the repercussions that came up in a lot of different conversations that people were afraid of.
Okay, some express frustration with a lack of process standardization between and within departments. Also, the feeling that some things will never change. That we hear a lot. But they're going to tell you it's the way we've always done it, so they're not going to change. There's a perception there are cliques and social relationships. And by the way, the longer you're in business and the longer people get to work together, the more that fine line comes in between my social or personal relationships and my business relationships. And man, it's a fine line. And so sometimes it carries over, and some people think they're not invited into the group or the inner circle. That happens a lot. Many frontline supervisors are concerned about compensation issues which result in turnover. Now, we haven't got into the in-depth turnover or some of that analysis, which we're going to do soon. But I got to tell you, turnover costs money. It costs tons of people don't realize how much money they waste on turnover. We talk about this with the organizations we work on because, first of all, if you talk about compensation, we believe people should be paid fairly and equitably for the job they're doing. So if you want to be a CEO, you're probably going to make more money than you are if you want to be a janitor. There's nothing wrong with either of those professions. They just will be paid different. So we believe people should be paid fairly and equitably for the job that they do. But then what you have to do is you have to understand when you're in a contained market, I mean, people from Boston aren't going to come here for jobs. People from North Alabama, it's local. So you're deriving most of your talent and you're competing locally. And so the price is driven by the market. What we know is that if you get your compensation right and you have the ability to attract people and you cut that turnover will save, If you cut that turnover down, you're going to save a lot of money. And plus, I mean, you guys know you've had the frustration. Here goes another one. It's that revolving door. You got to train them. You got to pay overtime to people to do the work when they're not. So there are just a number of things we can do that, from the compensation standpoint, that will help. Now, this does not mean, so don't anyone walk out of this room thinking that any of us are proponents of everybody getting big salary increases. It doesn't work that way. We firmly believe that you should be paid fairly and equitably based on what people are making doing jobs like you. So again, if I happen to be a custodian, I shouldn't believe I should be compensated like the CEO. That's two different jobs, two different responsibilities, whole lot of different changes. So then this lack of consequences of action. Now I'm going to share something with you, and Jan, I hope you don't get mad at me. But we asked Bill and Jan, when's the last time you fired somebody? When's the last time you fired somebody? Bill?
About 6 years ago.
Okay, Jan? And how many times did we do that? How many? Okay, so now, and by the way, I want you to know, we are not proponents of that. But we are proponents of what's called, there's got to be something, consequences for lack of action. So here are the steps, folks. You empower people. You want them to do what they should do to get their job done the best they can every day. You're empowered. Here it is. Once you do that, you have to define their sphere of responsibility. Now, if I'm in HR, I can't make financial decisions, right? I can't do that. If I'm in finance, I can't make HR decisions. If I'm in program management, I can't make marketing decisions, so on. So we define that responsibility. Then the next step is you must be accountable. If you don't do this, you know, we have to talk to you. It's like being to work regularly. If you don't come to work, we got to talk to you. But then that last one, that consequences of action, and what happens is it's always easier for us to not have that difficult conversation about somebody not doing their job right. And then consequences of action, come on in, Scott. Okay, you all heard the story. Scott, the car's running. Okay, there you go.
Scott, 10 o'clock.
And that's his first warning, right, Bill?
Lack of consequence.
Timing was perfect. So what happens now? You got empowerment, you got to define the responsibilities, and you say we're going to hold you accountable. So what happens if they don't do it? And you've all been around, you've all been around people who just don't do it. Now, if they don't do it because they don't really give a rat's drum, you know, those people, well, it's not hard for us to tell them to take a strong line. But those people that try real hard and can't get there, that's a lot more difficult. And we take more time and patience with them. But there have to be standards. If you think of any sport, basketball, football, soccer, lacrosse, those people, those kids or those men or those women that go out and try out for that team, they don't all make it. Now, why is it? Because as much as they try, they don't have the skill set. But this can happen with employees, too. You know, I would love to get my arms around finance, but I'm telling you, if I were your finance manager, if you didn't fire me, you'd be in deep trouble. Because as much as I love it, I'm not good at it. So you have to really have people who are tried and dedicated. So that consequences of action has got to come into place. And if I don't do what I'm told to do, what do we do about it? And it doesn't always mean fire. It just means some sort of repercussion. There's a perception that support services in Mount Pleasant not being responsible or flexible to others' needs. Some indicated they are spread very thin. Some upper-level managers manage with a control and command method. I want to talk about this for a second because we see this a lot where we get people within groups who say, but that's the policy. You got to live by the policy. Well, when you're in HR, and by the way, we are an HR firm. That's where we started. That's our roots. That's who we are. We know that when you work with people, you're living in this gray area. And I don't care. The policy is a guideline. And so you've got to be flexible enough to deal with the needs of the individual when you're looking at policy. And I could give you example after example. The most critical one, though, is the one that's easiest, is attendance. So we say, okay, if you miss 4 days, we're going to talk to you. Well, it's different if somebody's in the hospital because they just had an appendectomy for 4 days than this person who didn't care enough to call in and is gone for 4 days. I'm telling you, those are two different scenarios, and we're going to treat those people differently. So this whole thing has got to be about not having laws and rules and regulations. It's about doing what's right for the people that work with you. Some indicated they were spread very thin. Some upper-level managers, but that command and control, perception of lack of accountability. Favoritism was cited as a contributor to general lack. By the way, we have never done one of these where favoritism didn't communicate. I know somebody likes somebody else better than me, or I've known them from before and they're good people. I just keep giving them chances, whatever. Favoritism will always come up. And it's something as leaders you have to learn to deal with and how to deal with. Some departments are very proactive, protective of their information. Kiss of death. Okay, the current organization is siloed. Hiring process takes too long. Mandatory training is disorganized and tracking is not accurate. Inconsistent and misunderstood. I could go an hour on the compensation system. Everybody comes to work and they want to be paid fairly for what they do. The problem is you have to define fairly, and we have to understand that not everybody's paid the same. Different people make different amounts of money for good reasons, but it's always something that comes up. What we found out here, the feedback I got from these three people, was that nobody was saying, I'm not paid enough. It's an issue for hiring, it's an issue for consistency, is an issue for parity. So those are things that you just need to look at later on. Lack of appropriate orientation for new hires, perceived disconnect between upper management and staff, inconsistency in decision-making, perceived favoritism, lack of empowerment for management staff, the on-call and quality system being evaluated, lack of collaboration approach between departments, understanding and deployment of technology. So you guys can read this, board members. I did the board members, and it was pretty much to a point that they believe their job is to support the mission and vision of the organization. Now on page 10, consultants overview. This is our takeaways for you guys. There are positive changes seen under the new direction. The organization has grown significantly, invested in technology, and worked feverishly to improve communication. Most participants cited stability, flexibility, commitment to caring for staff during times of need and a strength. And I would agree with that. That is a definite strength. If one health for family issues arise, the agency is supportive and helpful and goes above and beyond. The prevailing feeling among those interviews that they genuinely care about the individual served. This is that mission focus. They want to support continued growth and taking the organization to the next level. The CEO has an open door policy. However, some express concern that they have to go to him to get issues resolved because other managers are not responsive or take too long to get back to them. And so you don't want the chain of command to slow this thing down. So that's something that you're going to have to focus on downstream. Most of the participants spoke openly about strengths and weaknesses. Some, however, did so because they were encouraged to be honest. Some expressed concern about repercussions, especially when describing perceived favoritism, unprofessional behavior, and cliques. Now, this, I want you to know, this is not abnormal. This is not something that you guys own the share of the market there. This happens every place we go. The longer you're in business, the greater the chance that stuff grows. And the more important it is to put systems in place to make sure people believe that there is no favoritism. The growth and changes that have been experienced over the past few years as a result of the CEO personally acting as project manager, the organization appears to be lacking in the following: standardization of operations management practices, including incident management, collaboration across departments and locations, quality control, compliance process improvement, team building and collaboration, internal communication strategy and organization, and employee engagement. Now, I just want to draw a quick picture. We do a lot of work. some work with colleges who are trying to do the right thing for their kids to get them into the marketplace. In the marketplace, when we facilitated these meetings, the marketplace told the colleges, look, we want bright kids. We want kids that are good engineers or good salespeople. We want that. But they better know how to work in a collaborative environment. The day of them coming to work and going in the back room and putting a visor on and just looking at a computer screen are dead. That's dead. It's gone. It will never be in our society again. So every one of us has to understand that we have to be part of a team. And when we have to define the team, usually it's what we call cross-functional teams, because we know you can't work in your little silo in your own little unit of departments. You've got to go outside of that. So this whole process about team building and understanding the way other people perceive what I do, it's critical, because the more I know about what people don't like about me, the greater the chance I can decide to change it or not. And if you don't believe that's true, you just have to ask my wife. I mean, clearly that's a long list over there. So I have lots to work on. The compensation system is perceived to be inconsistent. And again, I'm telling you, we haven't gotten in, taken a deep dive, but typically what we find with compensation systems, it's just not communicated well. The growth and changes that have been experienced over the past few years are a result of the CEO personally acting as project manager. The organization appears to be lacking standardization of operating practices and incident management, collaboration, quality control, team building, and internal communication. It is unclear who is in charge of program operations. So now on page 11, numerous individuals comment that support services centralized in the Mount Pleasant office are not effectively supporting other areas of the agency. And this is difficult. Remember I told you before about that old corporate office thing? I remember when I first started my career, I was told by my boss, when you go out into the outlying regions, you tell them you're from corporate and you're here to help. I got kicked out of more damned offices than you can imagine, because they're not buying that stuff. If you're from corporate, you're not here to help. So that myth has got to be disbanded. The organizational structure needs to be examined in more detail and potentially be redesigned. Functional analysis is required for each area. Again, we are all about redesigning your organization to put it back together to be the most effective to go where you're going, not to support where you're going. And most organizations just don't do this. They keep putting the Band-Aid on, and it doesn't get you there. So whoever designed this organization way back when, Bill's predecessor, Bill, it was for that time. And then we put the Band-Aids on. So you got to go back and say, okay, how do the functions align? And that's a very arduous process. But the good news is everybody in this room, if we get to do this, will be involved in that process. The internal communication systems are weak and do not attempt to bridge the communication gap that exists. There's a lack of decision-making, authority, and role definition, inconsistency, and sense of urgency. I want to talk about that for a little bit, because we do believe that organizations do have to have a sense of urgency. You know, you can't say, well, I'll get to it tomorrow. I mean, after a while, that wears pretty thin. And if I'm a department or a user who needs that information, for you to tell me I'll get to it when I can get to it is not going to make me happy. So we really have to have a sense of urgency about supporting what's going on a day-to-day basis. Decision-making, administrative support, staff utilization, perceived inability to make changes, lack of cross-functional teams and communication, internal IT support, quality function is fragmented. The support functions need to become more proactive, bottom-line oriented, customer service driven. Now, this is near and dear to my heart, because I would be the person to tell you. Now, remember, I'm an HR guy. I came from HR, and I understand HR is a support function. They don't need us. They don't need us. I mean, we just cost money, right? That's all we do. So you better be proactive to affecting the bottom line to make sure that we're engaged, to make sure the operating people get what they need. Any support function. It could be IT, it could be finance, it could be purchasing. It doesn't matter. They're our customers. And if we don't take care of our customers, they don't need us. So this bottom line orientation and customer service driven is critical for support companies. Conclusion. it is important for leadership to recognize that achieving the desired results takes a commitment to long-term, multi-dimensional organizational efforts. Last night when we were talking to the board, one of the questions that came up was, okay, if we go into this enterprise transformation, these people all have full-time jobs. They're not here just playing music and playing games on the computer. Are they going to have more work? And the answer is absolutely. Absolutely. It's like that sign on the highway that says, temporary inconvenience, permanent improvement. But it's going to be, if you start this journey, it's going to be different because you not only have to do your job as you know it now, but you've got to be focused on changing things which take time. So this is the journey we would tell you as consultants. You don't ever start this journey unless you intend to finish, because starting it and stopping it will only cause you pain. Developing and or identifying leaders that are prepared to support the enterprise transformation, including leadership development, team building, role clarification, accountability, and empowerment. We are truly about supporting people to get from where they are to where they need to be. That's a change, and it requires support, understanding, and some mentorship. Executive coaching, leadership training, team building are necessary. And the transformation, it is critical for the leadership team to establish credibility and communicate. So here's what happens. In the organizations that go from good to great, that senior team, the people that surround themselves around the CEO, have to understand the mission, the vision, and be able to communicate it in the absence. It's not one person's job. Your leadership team has to buy it, they have to own it, and they have to help with the transformation. It's not optional. That's where the difference is. It isn't optional. I can't elect that. In the transformation, it's critically important for the leadership team to establish credibility and communicate their commitment. They also support the implementation of structural and process changes necessary to the growth. Communicating and reinforcing the vision of transformation, commitment to a systematic transformation, clarifying roles and expectations for senior leaders, evaluating and restructuring second-tier management, implementing team building, developing leadership and communication expectations, provide leadership development, and utilize cross-functional training. Now, there's nothing that I'm talking about that you guys could look at and say, that's simple. If it's simple, you'd already have done it, right? But these are the things that we know are necessary to get from here to there. So our recommendations are to implement process programs which include the following: executive coaching for all senior leaders, role definition for leaders and support staff, functional analysis for every area, department, unit, leadership training, team building, employee engagement and empowerment programs, revamp the performance management process. I could go on an hour about that. I could tell you that I've never worked, not one of our clients has said, we've invented a better mousetrap. We've never had somebody say, oh, we love our performance management system. It just doesn't happen. And so I could, when and if we get to that, we'll have lots of fun with that. Revamp, evaluate and modify compensation system, maximize the utilization of IT, develop and enhance effectiveness of cross-functional training, establish an ongoing strategic planning, and that's strategic and tactical planning process, provide for succession planning and management development, institute process improvement methodology. Okay, so we recommend that you guys embark on the enterprise transformation. And here's where it's different. I mean, we do it. There are probably other people out there who do it. We know there's nobody who does it as well. But what we do know is that if you could have done it, you would have already done it. You've got to have help. This is where that outside, you need to have somebody who knows every step, knows how to do it, how to walk you through it, and help you get through functional analysis, get through executive coaching, modify my behaviors to be effective in the future. And so we know that has to be somebody from the outside. And so that's it. Now, questions or thoughts? You've asked for a copy. Can we make that? How do we make that happen?
I'll email it to you.
Okay, and then you guys work it out. Okay. But just promise me, we're not going to fax it. We're not going to post it on the bulletin board. Okay. All right. Now, what questions? What other questions? First of all, let me ask a question. Was there anything in here that was new news to anybody in this room? Shouldn't be. right? We got the information from you. So it shouldn't. And what normally happens, especially at this level, is that people are close enough to know the problems associated with getting there. They just don't know. And that's
the little lady wanted to say something in response to John's first question. About, was there anything, your body language. I thought you were going to say something. And then John jumped in.
Well, I'm thinking about this, and as I said, it's just a lot to digest.
It is.
Through it, like, the way you were going through it, and I understand. But I'm trying to figure out, are we going to then pass this on different levels? Talk about executive coaching, talk about all of these things you're doing. It sounds like it's on this level. Will that be also on like program manager in the home level? Or are we to take that into the next level? Or I'm not clear about that. You may have
that's an excellent question. And there's probably a lot of people in this room thinking about it. It starts here.
Right.
So the vision has to be created here. The senior people that support the person that creates the mission or are part of it have to support the transformation. So they have to understand what's going on, be supportive, and know their role. Then as we move down, parts of enterprise transformation include things like supervisory managerial training. Those people have to be trained to be leaders. Some are, some aren't. There's a difference between a supervisor, manager, and a leader. So we have to train them.
But you would be doing that. Program managers in the house, not.
No, that's what your outside partner.
Correct. And the way it's delivered is delivered by outside consultants and then done in a train-a-trainer model. So you can create that as an ongoing onboarding process for new people. So everything is done, at least in our approach, everything is done in a capacity building mode so that it can be sustained, taught and sustained once we're gone.
Absolutely. Yeah, because regardless, if you bring a consultant in, you don't want them to get an office and take up residence. That's not. Our job is to transform, teach you guys how to do it, and then get out. GN, I know we're on the time crunch, so everybody wants to know what you're going to do there.
Well, what I would say is, having accepted this presentation for the third time,
he's got it all committed to memory.
Right? You can distill it into one. If we could do that, I would say we have three sets of customers. Number one set, people and families that we customers. I think we do a pretty darn good job at that. Number two are the counties and other authorities. When we do a decent job with them, we can improve it. And then number three, direct support structure. And that's where this is here for that particular. I wanted to see what everyone's thoughts were of all of that. And yes, I'm not surprised, but I think we need to shift the paradigm at the administrative level from what where people refer to us to where we're here to support the people that are doing the mission, doing the job. And we have to be SPs. So how we're going to do that, we have a meeting with the board next Friday to discuss a lot of this stuff in the enterprise transformation system. And I'm sure Deb and I are going to talk some more in the interim. But if there's one thing sort of we can grasp in this, is that we've really got to focus as an agency, as an administrative staff, that we've got to support those people that is paramount. Because as John touched, our pay rate is not the best. We're competing with McDonald's. Our benefits are actually listed as really pretty decent. I'm sure there's for-profit entities that have better benefits. So why are people here? They're here for the mission. So we've got to foster that. We've got to reinforce it, and we've got to support it.
Okay, any questions of GN?
Are evaluations or merit increases possible?
If we do it, the answer is yes. We call it performance management system, and I have some very strong beliefs about that people should always be told what they do well and what they don't do well, and then they should be rewarded at some given time. And if we're going to give merit increases, they need to be metrics. If we're going to just give across-the-board increases, we don't need the metrics. But people have to understand how they're going to do it and what the expectations.
Other questions, feedback, surprises?
Okay, thank you, guys, and I apologize.
I'm surprised Art is
Well, thank you all very much. Thank you for your patience, and I'm sure GN's going to be back to you shortly after the meeting with the board and tell you what's going on. And are we covered now, GN, for the next group? Is that what we were going to do?
We can. We'll do that just reply.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you all. You all have my number. I mean, if you want to call me or Mark or Scott or Deb,